again. Welcome to the 2026 Impact Grant for Deaf Organizations webinar. My name is Sasha Ponappa, and I am the Executive Director of the Deaf Organizations Fund, DOF. My visual description is I am a brown woman with long brown hair wearing a dark blue blouse. Behind me are several pictures on the wall and plants on a shelf. On the right, there is a slide, and on that slide shows a multicolored half-tone effect photo of a white woman who is signing the word organizations in ASL. The purpose of today's webinar is Deaf Organization Fund, DOF, has launched our annual impact grant for deaf interpreter organizations. The funding will provide up to $20,000 for 10 selected deaf organizations and programs. The application window is now open, and we will review important information about the grant and answer any questions you may have. If you have any other tech issues, please message hosts and panelists directly, and Drew will assist you. Drew, say hi in the chat for everybody. Perfect. On this next slide on the left, we have DOF's logo with hands signing the word community in ASL. A bit about DOF and who it is that we are. Our mission is to strengthen organizations working with deaf communities. Our vision is a future in which deaf communities have access to a wide array of services provided by well-resourced organizations. Between 2020 and 2025, we have awarded nearly $500,000 to 32 grant projects. In addition to our grant program, we offer collaboration and consulting opportunities, educational webinars, technical assistance, grantee coaching, and more. The next slide on the left, you see images of articles from various news sources on recent nonprofit challenges. We make changes to our grant program based on what's happening in the community and climate. In the past year, we have observed two key areas. First, deaf organizations receive less than 1% of the annual $37.2 billion in grants awarded every year. So, secondly, in 2025, we saw significant attacks on the nonprofit sector and disability rights. To better understand the impact on deaf organizations and programs specifically, we polled organizations that had attended our webinars in spring of 2025. And the results of those polls were 65% of deaf organization leaders felt uncertain about future funding. 55% experienced or anticipated a decrease in funding. 45% reported an increase in demand for their services. On the slide on the left is a circular photo of people sitting in outdoor tables. Most of the photo has a gray overlay with one crescent portion in pink, indicating 1%. 1% of funding for deaf organizations and programs is not enough. In the past, we typically funded $100,000 for 4 to 6 deaf organizations and programs. But this year, with community support, we raised $200,000 to support 10 deaf organizations and programs for this year's grant. As I had just mentioned, $200,000 will be awarded amongst 10 deaf selected deaf organizations and programs in May 2026. The grant cycle is from May 2026 until May 2027. For each one of the grantees, they will receive an unrestricted $20,000. You must apply by Tuesday, March 10th at 5 p.m. Central Time. You can access all of our grant materials, including previewing the application in English or ASL, before applying and going to the link at the bottom of the screen. So you can look at it before you decide to apply. The link is in the chat. As I mentioned earlier, our funding will remain unrestricted. This means that funds support the overall mission of an organization. There are no rules governing how the grant dollars are spent, as long as it aligns with the organization's mission and operations. However, we've added something new this year based on the climate of 2025 that I had just described. Priority will be given to proposals that added the following: immediate, urgent needs of your community, and sustainable, the long-term needs of your organization. So, community, your proposal, this would be areas where your proposal seeks to meet the time-sensitive needs of community members. For example, food, housing, safety, and access to mental health services, among other fundamental aspects of well-being. Organization. Your proposal addresses the capacity building needs of the organization. For example, cost sharing of resources among partner organizations, development, fundraising efforts, administrative needs, etc. So you can apply to one of the two categories, both of the categories, or another area of need. But priority and added weight will be considered for the proposals that address the needs of the community and organization. We will only accept one proposal from your organization or a partnership of organizations. If a partnership of organizations submits, only one org can submit on behalf of the group of organizations. So now that you know the goals and priorities of this year's grant, who can apply for this grant? It is important to make sure that your organization or program meets the eligibility criteria. The first criteria is that you are a deaf-centric organization or program who works primarily with the deaf communities. So, if you are a deaf-centric program within the larger mainstream hearing organization, you can apply as long as your proposal is tied to the needs of the program. The second eligibility criteria is We seek to fund organizations in the United States with a 501c tax exempt status, or organizations who have a fiscal sponsor based in the United States with a 501c3 tax exempt status. The fiscal sponsor is another nonprofit organization who has agreed to oversee your grant, and they have 501c3 status. You can also use a hearing fiscal sponsor for your organization or program, but you must work primarily within the deaf communities. We've received questions about whether the application can include a fiscal sponsor. You're going to need your fiscal sponsor's employer identification number, EIN, to gain access to the application. And there's only one set of questions about the fiscal sponsor, but the entire application is about your organization. We cannot fund international organizations that do not have 501c3 or tax exempt financial sponsor based in the United States. We also cannot fund companies or businesses. On this slide, there are types of projects that we cannot fund. First would be capital projects, meaning construction, renovation, physical expansions. We request that a sponsor or otherwise, we cannot accept to sponsor or otherwise fund an event or series of events, a festival or conference. We have previously received requests for one-time conferences or festivals, which may constitute event sponsorship. This grant is intended to be a year-long project that focuses on priority areas, not an event sponsorship. However, if you're hosting an event or a series of events for a priority area, for example, meeting the immediate needs of your community through food drives or events that deliver clothes or bedding, that would work. You need to clearly explain this, though, in your proposal. The third area is individuals who are not affiliated with a nonprofit organization. So if a person is requesting a scholarship for college for themselves, we would not be able to fund that. If they are requesting a personal loan or sponsorship, that would not be something that we would fund. A person who's requesting funds to buy their own personal assistive devices, also, your project can fund individuals who support your organization. For example, a contracted bookkeeper to manage your organization's finances, or to cover your staff's salary time on a project, or to cover hotel vouchers for your clients in need of emergency housing. Those we can fund.
Next slide. The image on the left is a screenshot of our application portal. Right above the application, there's a link called Manage Collaborators with a red circle. So now that I've talked about the grant overview and our priorities, I'm going to shift to the application and the application portal. The name of our application portal is called Submittal, and all applicants and applications must be submitted on this portal. If you previously applied for our grant, you can try using the same existing account that you used in the past. If you've never applied with us, you will need to create a new account. We encourage that account to be tied to someone within your organization, for example, a staff member, board member, or a director. We also suggest using a general organization email address. For example, info@yourorganisationsname.org. The reason why, let's say if we award the grant, that those individuals will be responsible for providing us with your financial information and the grant reports. If you're using a personal email like sasha@dof.org, like my personal email, let's say I happen to leave the organization or am moved to a different position. Once I am awarded that grant funding, that email address isn't tied to me and I won't be receiving it. If you instead use a general email address, multiple members of your organization will receive that notification from DOF about being awarded grant funding. If you want others to help with the grant application, you can. You would be calling those collaborators. On your application, you would click the Manage Collaborator link, and it will send those individuals links. Once they accept the link, they can enter into the portal and work together on your application. Once it's time to submit the application, you, the account holder, who has that email address associated with the account, are responsible for submitting it. If you need your application in an alternative format for accessible purposes, please reach out to our team for assistance. Once you are in submittal, you will see that there are two sections. One is titled Eligibility. The second is the actual proposal and the application. You have to finish the eligibility before you can see the application. If you don't meet the eligibility requirements, you will not be able to move on to the application. The eligibility will ask for your employer ID number, your EIN, as well as your fiscal sponsor's tax exemption status. There will also be 4 questions regarding eligibility that you will have to answer. Yes or no questions. Questions about the community that you serve, the purpose for the funds that you are requesting. And if you meet all of those eligibility requirements, you will move on to the application. Again, if you do not meet those eligibility requirements through those yes and no questions, you will not move on to the application. The application has 4 different parts: the organization's profile, the organization's overview, proposal, and the optional questions. I'm going to go in depth into each section now. The first section of the application is called the organization's profile. It's going to get like basic information about your organization. For example, the name, other names perhaps that are used by your organization, your address, your website, details like that. Now, the organization's address needs to be the legal address. It doesn't necessarily need to be the physical address. So the address that you get legal documents for your organization, or the address that you use to file your 990 paperwork, is the one you're going to be using. The next question is about your board of directors, their titles, and their professional affiliations. Professional affiliations mean outside of your organization. Where else do they work or volunteer their time? This year, we added a chart for you to enter information for up to 10 board members, their titles, and their professional affiliations. If you have more than 10, you can upload a document following the chart template for the remaining board members. Again, you can add their name, their title, and their professional affiliations in that document. For the fiscal sponsor, this is the only question on the application that is tied to your fiscal sponsor. If you are using one, it'll ask for their name, their employer identification number, their EIN, and you can upload your agreement to the portal. Next is the annual operating budget. So from the drop-down, you will pick which budget best fits your organization. There are three new questions on the application that we have this year: the mission, the areas of focus, and the type of work that your organization provides. For the mission, you can input your mission statement. For the areas of focus, a list of different causes or areas of focus will be provided to you, and you will select up to three that best reflect your organization's work. Third, the type of work question is something that you will then select from a list of different services and programs that relate to the type of work that your organization does. The last question in this section is called the conflict of interest, the COI, and I will go in depth into this part later in my presentation. We do ask about the conflict of interest on the application this year, and all organizations are required to disclose if they have an actual or a perceived conflict of interest with our grant review committee, DOF, and our parent organization, which is called Communication Services for the Deaf, or CSD. Now, disclosing a conflict of interest does not disqualify your application. If you're unsure whether something constitutes a conflict, please contact the DOF team and ask for our guidance. Failure to disclose conflicts of interest in a timely manner may result in the denial of your grant application. But again, I'll talk a little bit more in depth about the conflict of interest later on in my presentation. So the next section of the application is called the organization overview. There are three questions about your programs, the resources you have, the role in the community that you serve and how they've shaped your organization, as well as your organization's accomplishments. If you are a new organization that has just established itself, that's fine. Just tell us what types of impact you hope to make with your organization. Those three questions you can answer in either ASL or English. If you would like to answer in ASL, you can film a 2-minute video answering one question, upload it to YouTube, and then share that link, that URL, to the answer box for that specific question. If you'd like to answer the questions in English, you can type answers up to 350 words. You can answer all questions in ASL, in English, or a combination of the two. It's important that you have one link per question, one language, interpreter per question. The next section is called the proposal. There are 4 questions associated to this section. How much is your organization requesting? Which funding priority area are you selecting? What issue are you seeking to address with the grant? And what is your plan for using the grant funds? The last 2 questions are open-ended questions, and you can respond in ASL or English. If you want to respond in ASL, you can sign up to a 3-minute video, post it to YouTube, copy that link, and paste it into the answer box for that specific question. If you want to respond in English, you can type a up to 500-word response. You can answer in either language, but please pick one language per question. So the absolute maximum you can request for funding is $20,000. With the last 2 questions, we provide examples in ASL and English, just made up examples of what it is that we're looking for and what we want to see in your proposal. Does it mean that you need to make your answers exactly like ours? It does not. You just need to make sure that you are paying attention to the examples we give. In your answers, whether it's in English or ASL, make sure you provide us with clear examples. We ask you how you'll use the funding, and we're looking for a high-level summary of your activities, your timeline, and how you plan to use the funding. You do not need to do a cost breakdown of each item. A high-level summary example would include, for example, percentages. 60% of the funding will go to X. 20% of the funding will go to Y. 20% of the remaining funding will go to Z. Or you can use dollar amounts. For example, 10,000 will go to X, 5,000 will go to Y, and the remaining 5,000 will go to Z. The last section is called optional questions. And this is completely up to you. It's not required and it will not affect the evaluation of your proposal. We do rely heavily on this section to help shape DOF's work. For example, in the past applications, some applicants have mentioned that they needed more time to be able to give their answer in ASL, or they needed more of a word count to give their answer in English. You will notice that this year's application has increased both the time for the ASL videos and the word count for the English responses. Now, for the 4 questions, the first 2 are open-ended, which means that you can respond in ASL or English. If you're responding in ASL, it's a 1-minute video that you will then post to YouTube, copy the link, and post into the answer box. The English answer is a word count of 150 words. So please give us any information, whether it's feedback on the application. And then the last 2 questions are multiple choice. We at DOF often think about different programs and resources that we would like to offer to deaf programs and organizations. We are in the works and developing a training, and we want to know what types of topics you would like to see. The third question has a list of different topics that we're asking you to pick up to 3 that are relevant to you, that you feel will benefit you and your organization. The last question, we're thinking as a funder, how can we support more deaf organization and programs with their administrative needs? So we want to get a sense of what areas you need help with. There's a list that we provide. Pick from them as to what you feel your organization will benefit from most. Again, this section is optional. It's not required. If you don't respond, it does not impact negatively on your proposal. So you've submitted your application. Who is evaluating and reviewing it? This is the grant review process. And there are 3 different organizations. We have the Grant Review Committee, we have DOF, and we have CSD, Communications Services for the Deaf, our parent organization. The Grant Review Committee has 5 community members from the deaf community who have some nonprofit experience. They will evaluate all of the applications using a rubric that I'll talk about later. DOF, our staff and board, as well as CSD, people who are from CSD that sit on the board will be evaluating the application. With the Grant Review Committee, once they're done with the evaluations, they will make recommendations to the DOF and CSD as to the top 10 finalists. DOF and CSD will evaluate, verify, and make the final decision. Now, who evaluates your application depends on the conflict of interest that you disclose. We know that the deaf community is small and interconnected. To ensure that the evaluation procedure is fair and transparent, we are requiring full disclosure from any actual or perceived conflict of interest with the grant review committee, DOF, and or CSD staff and board. Some examples of a conflict of interest could be that I am applying for the DOF grant. My spouse is a board member of DOF. That's a conflict because we are in the same family. The second example is someone from the grant review committee happens to also work for my organization. That's a conflict of interest. By disclosing the conflict of interest, does that mean that we're disqualifying your application? It doesn't. However, it does allow DOF to assess all of the potential conflict of interest and take the appropriate action. For example, reclusing someone that has a conflict of interest from evaluating your proposal. All the applicants are not allowed to contact anyone on the grant review committee during or after the application period to discuss their application or DOF's funding decision. Now you know who's going to be evaluating your application. Now, what will your application be evaluated on? 3 different areas, including equity, impact, and feasibility. Make sure you pay attention to all 3, as all 3 will be used to evaluate all areas of your application, except for the optional questions. This rubric is available on our website, both in ASL and in English. You will see that score 1 means a certain thing, score 2 means another thing. It's all explained in depth on our website. It'll help you understand what your application will be evaluated on. If you still have questions after reviewing the rubric, you can reach out to the DOF team. We're going to drop that link in the chat if you need to reach out to us for any questions. So you will be notified in May if you are awarded. What do you expect from that point on? So in May 2026, the 12-month grant project starts and will end in May 2027. When awarded, the grantee must meet with DOF and we will review the grant award agreement together to make sure we are all on the same page. There are 2 required reports. One is an interim report at 6 months into the project, and then a final report at 12 months or at the completion of the project. Grantees can meet with DOF at any time, monthly, quarterly, or whenever is needed to receive additional support and discuss their progress. So I have gone through the presentation on the grant and I'm ready to answer any questions that you may have. This is a friendly reminder that this is not the forum for in-depth discussion of projects or organizational needs. Please email the DOF team if you need to discuss anything like that.
So Morgan's question was, they have a small organization with a few board members, and Morgan was wondering if we had any expectation around who the physical agent is, meaning the person who is financially responsible for the funds, who is going to be taking care of those funds. No, we don't have any expectation around that. It could be anybody on the board. You can ask for funding actually to be able to cover the cost of a bookkeeper or another person, say a business manager, to manage those funds. We leave that entirely up to you as far as how to best use the funds. So the next question is from Patricia Sanchez. I'm going to go ahead and read the question. So their question is that first they are a deaf CEO and they're asking if they can request funds to pay for an ASL interpreter for job interviews for deaf job seekers. It also mentioned that Patricia is an employment specialist outside VR service. So the organization must be a 501c3 tax exempt organization based here in the US or be one that has a fiscal sponsor that is tax exempt. So if you meet our eligibility criteria and that you serve the deaf community, then you could include interpreting costs in your proposal. But keep in mind the areas that we are weighting more heavily as far as prioritization. Also, we are mindful of ADA requirements and what it is that is expected to comply with. So, repeating her question, um, she is in the process of setting up a 501c3 for a tax exempt organization. However, she has yet to get that tax exemption yet. She was wondering if DOF offers this once a year or more than once a year. Currently, we are offering this annually. This is our 7th grant cycle that we're offering. The next time we will be offering this grant will be in a year. Um, we would love to offer it more than once a year, but unfortunately, we're not there yet. The next question is from Amy. I'm going to read it. This is Amy Horrocks. Amy says their organization is based in the United States. It's a US based international nonprofit who supports the deaf community in Nepal. And when doing the proposal, they're wondering if they should build this around the US based board of directors and individuals who are on the organization or a part of the organization, or if it should be about the deaf individuals in Nepal. So the organizations need to fill out the information about themselves. If all of the questions are specifically about your organization. If you're applying with a partner organization or partner organizations that you're going to be working together, all of the organizations have to be eligible and meet the eligibility criteria, meaning that you provide services to the deaf community as well. We'll move on to an English-based question. The question is that this person's agency works with different disabilities, however, has a large hard of hearing population that they serve. They're wondering if they can still apply. We would say that all applications must meet our eligibility criteria. The primary community that they serve must be the deaf, hard of hearing, deaf blind, deaf disabled communities. So Michael's question was that he works for a large agency that serves a variety of communities and populations. However, his specific part focuses on deaf and hard of hearing individuals. So, and that community. So, to meet the eligibility criteria, you can be a part of a larger hearing organization. However, your program needs to be deaf centric, meaning that it primarily serves and interfaces with the deaf communities. And again, the organization must be 501c3 tax exempt. And if you've met both of those criteria, then you are welcome to apply. Okay, we have time for a few more questions. So the next question is, Would it be within the grant scope to use the funding to create a new website for the organization? Our funding is unrestricted. It is entirely up to you how it is that you use that funding. If this is your greatest area of need, by all means. However, keep in mind we are holding heavier weight to the areas of community and sustainability. So I'll repeat the question. I was asked as far as our second priority that DOF has, organizations addressing, infrastructure of organizations, and we gave different examples that could be organizations partnering together to share costs, administrative costs, fundraising, etc. And the question was, do you have prioritization within that category? And the answer is no, we don't have prioritization within that category of capacity building. No one area of capacity building has more weight than another area of capacity building. The important thing is that you explain clearly what it is that you're looking for and how it is going to support your organization best. The next question, this is going to be my final question, and I am going to try my best to answer the rest of the questions through the FAQ document that will be sent out. I'm reading over it now. So the question is, this person has a 501c3 organization and they are looking for funding to support their program, their project. That's a new advocacy project that teaches the deaf community how to be able to advocate for themselves. They're asking if this is a good fit to be able to apply. They also have food programs, and they wondered what would be considered sustainability in that. We're not answering questions specifically about fit for this. If you in this platform, we would love it if you want to have a more specific conversation, reach out to us. But if there is anything that's time sensitive, emergency services, that kind of thing that impacts the sustainability of your organization, absolutely apply. There are additional questions still that we weren't able to get to, unfortunately. We will answer those questions in our FAQ that will be sent out through email next week. So, as I wrap up my presentation, I want to share with you a few important links. These links are also going to be provided in an email that goes out to you next week. The first link is called the Grant Overview. This is our website. It shows everything about the application, timeline, criteria. All of that information is there on that link. Second is Submittable. Submittable is the platform that you're going to need to submit your application on when it's time to submit your application. The next is technical issues. If you happen to have technical issues with Submittable, you're able to ask for help. If you don't hear anything back within 2 or 3 days from Submittable, we will jump in, just reach out to us, and we will try our best to troubleshoot with you. Thank you. Thank you for coming to our grant webinar. Once this Zoom closes, you'll be prompted with a short webinar survey. We would love for you to fill out that survey so that we can better plan for next year and how to advocate for more. So we look forward to receiving your applications before Tuesday, March the 10th at 5 Central Time. Bye.